I mean, how much longer? How much longer can we have that face up there? Let's get another face up. Oh, I don't know. Oh, that's a bit scraggly. I mean, it's slightly better though, right? Slightly better. Let's stop this. My built-in StreamYard music that was playing there. Welcome to The Last Rites. If you have already, thank you very much. If you haven't, please consider giving a subscribe to the channel. That would be super helpful today. I thought let's go a little bit back over Jimmy Savile. Now, a lot of us know all about Jimmy Savile. I feel like having a little video to encapsulate a lot of the history and some of the weirdness. How did I not know when I was a kid? Oh, but anyway, let's talk about some Jimmy Savile here. So, if you don't know who Jimmy Savile is, if you're watching from abroad, I guess the story's starting to leak over to the US now, at least through the Netflix documentary and all that kind of stuff. But he was a radio DJ and TV presenter that, when he died, lots and lots of information came out, and obviously there were rumors for many years about him being a very naughty man indeed. So he started out in a flat in Salford, which is about 2 miles from where I am right now, maybe a little bit less. Man United is 2 miles from where I am now. That's kind of gauging it like that. Maybe I'll have to go and film outside the place one day. The poor people that live there. And he basically started DJing locally initially. He was, if not the first, one of the first disc jockeys DJ. And he was one of the pioneers that got people jumping up and down to live music. It's insane that this is the guy. This is our hero. Every DJ that is around now should really be thanking Jimmy. Thanks, Jimmy. But of course, it's also not politically expedient to do so, and he should have those honors removed. That's absolutely. He has a lot of other honors which we talk about. But it's insane to think about, right? That he was one of the first ones to get people up and down. And of course, that's where he started meeting young women. Now, his brother, Vincent, I don't know too much. He's got a couple of brothers, right? I think it's Vincent. Sue me. You're probably dead as well. That was a bit of a dodgy character around Manchester, around these streets here. And he was in the nightclub game, and he started getting Savile into those nightclubs. And I think they started eventually running some nightclubs. There's a street that I walk by called Fountain Street quite regularly. And yeah, I'm going to have to go and see the location of the Three Coins. I think it got renamed something else later, up on Fountain Street in Manchester. But he started running that with his brother. And his brother was Vincent was a bit of a gangster, a bit of a, they take you downstairs and give you a beating, all that kind of stuff. So that's the world that he started to come up in, this murky underworld of Manchester. But yeah, got started into the nightclub game, and I think Vincent made his money from like booze and cigarettes and selling dodgy bits and pieces like that. But he also socialized with police, so that's part of what might lead into him getting away with this stuff. So like, come and hang out. We've got the girls. And the police say, okay, that sounds fun. And later on, you've at least got blackmail, right? Or maybe got friends. There's also a weird... I need to try and remember to take breaths. There's also a weird organization called Pi. Not the mathematical pi or a piece of pie or even American pie, right? PIE, the pedophile information exchange, which was I'm going to call it naughtiness. It was a naughtiness organization that was allowed to exist legally. It disbanded in the 80s, I think, but in the 60s it was pretty prime. So that's sort of the societal context. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's fine, it's absolutely fine." And were the police partying with him? Probably at that point, especially if you're in the local club game, you're going to meet all kinds of people. So yeah, Vincent Savile was kind of feared. But through doing this, Jimmy Savile got noted by Radio Luxembourg, which I believe broadcast across Europe. I think. And he became quite well known and got a big name for himself as a radio DJ. And then Radio 1, the big UK station, came along and picked him up. And I might have I think this is at Radio 1. We might have some pictures here. I mean, he's gross anyway, right? But yeah, like this sort of era. Hello there, playing the Beatles. Now then. Smoking cigars in the studio and all that sort of business. Although that probably wasn't the worst thing that he did in those studios. Not that there's any evidence on that, but let's just say that anyway. Absolutely grim. I mean, there's another one of him quite young. Let me just bring this one up here. Oh my god! I mean, we should have known, shouldn't we? Shouldn't we? Shouldn't have ever. But should we have known? Should we have known, or is the fact that we would know now, based on characters like this, that back then, okay, they might look a bit off, but it's just a bit wacky. Who knows? I mean, clearly they kind of got away with it, right? And from there, obviously, went into TV. He had this creepy seatbelt ad, like clunk click. Your face won't look the same after an accident unless you clunk click. Put your seatbelt on, etc. And then was picked to go and host a flagship program. Jim will fix it. I've got very, very vague memories of that. Very vague memories. Basically, children would write in to this monstrous pedophile and say, "Dear Jim, I really want to meet an astronaut, and I'll fix that for you." And then they get a little medal and they sit on his knee. And it's, exceedingly creepy now we look back at it. But yeah, it was just helping kids get their dreams, as far as anyone else was concerned at the time. But yeah, so it was in the UK. It was a famous, super famous. He was always on TV, like Top of the Pops, a music chart show, and Jim will fix it forever, just around forever. It was an old character that they'd wheel out every now and then, sort of like a shit Trump, like a shit Donald Trump. There's also people coming in and out over the years. There are rumours on the Leeds football stands that he was fiddling around with dead bodies, which has never really been evidenced, but the rumours were rife even back then. In 2012, someone came forward and said that they were raped at 16 and got pregnant, and that Savile refused to take responsibility. There was an illegal abortion. There was no police involved. He was 38. She was 16. This is obviously going back, but there was all these disparate little reports that started coming in throughout, really, and we'll cover some of those. Well, I might bounce around a little bit. There was an inquiry after he died, obviously, and West Yorkshire police investigated themselves, which is always interesting. Like the BBC are investigating themselves now, right? It's always interesting. How about we get an independent one in? That there were reports going into these like a Surrey police force, and West Yorkshire wouldn't receive it. So I think by the end there were 28 police forces that had reports, or that he committed offences in, and bits would drip in, or they'd be on intelligence files about something else and him vaguely related, but they would never communicate with each other. It's before you had these interconnected systems, I guess. Then you had to pick up a phone and go, "Hello, Bill, down London. Hello, mate. You heard about this, Peter?" "Yeah, mate." That would have been it, unless they were mates with him. There was also a newspaper investigation in the 60s. However, during the course of that investigation, they ended up hiring Jimmy Savile as a columnist, and then the investigation was dropped. So that seems fine. There was also an incident where a 15-year-old committed suicide in the 70s, Claire McAlpine, after she was a dancer on Top of the Pops, and it was this chart show. Everyone like jig around, and Savile would be there with his hands over around him. Or there's a video clip of like, whoop, absolutely grim, and everyone's going, "Oh, he's funny." And these 15-year-old girls would go and dance in this place and then get plied with alcohol. And then, I'm sure lots of different BBC employees and bands and artists and stuff would have ended up going off with these girls after. But yeah, this 15-year-old killed herself, and she left this diary saying, they would, I'd go back to people's places and I'd get drugged and plied with booze, and I wouldn't remember, and I'd basically get taken advantage of. And the authorities would not believe her. They said it was a fantasy. They said the diary was a fantasy. Her friend saw this, and her mother obviously believed her daughter, and no one else, like the BBC and the police, were like, "Nah, it's a fantasy." And the diary actually ended up going to Scotland Yard, the police headquarters, and went missing, like all good evidence does, like the moon tapes. Like all good evidence does, right? Just, we lost it. I don't know where that is. One of the most important pieces of evidence in that case was disappeared. Now, he ended up looking like this, by the way, and I'm sure we'll bring it on. Sorry, I've got multiple monitors here. He ended up looking like this. I mean, he also had access to a lot of things, right? Because we said we've already friends with the police, but he did a lot of charity work and he ran marathons, even though it turns out he only ran 2 and the rest he'd get driven to the end of smoking cigars. Very famous. Raised a lot of money for charity. And there is a TV clip where he talks about going to heaven. He's like, oh, I'm at the gates. And they say, well, you're evil. You've done all this nasty stuff. There's your debit account. You go, well, no, I got the credit. I did all this nice stuff too. The accent is off there. Don't worry about that. He sounds nicer when I say it. But he also got in with like healthcare and would be a hospital porter at Broadmoor Hospital, which was for normally the criminally insane back then, I guess, criminals with mental health issues, craze and stuff. Yeah, we had a vague family member that knew everyone in there that was in there for stabbing his friend in the head with a heroin needle. But anyway, that's and someone escaped with these. We got offered as a family these little tiny TVs in the 90s that were obviously cutting edge tech, but it had something to do with the guy that escaped. He had like white hair and stuff. I'll have to dig into that. But yeah, so we always heard stories about Broadmoor over the years, but he would go and help out in there, and by all accounts, also obviously fiddle about with mentally ill men, whether or not they're criminals or not. They're in hospital. Shouldn't do that. But he basically had the keys, right? So he was allowed from the late 60s to the mid 1990s when they tightened up security, nearly 30 years. He was pretty much allowed free reign. He had keys. He could stay in his camper van on the ground and just come and go. Absolutely insane. Now, the next one is a little bit closer to me in terms of where I grew up, just outside London. Just a few miles away, there was a hospital called Stoke Mandeville Hospital. And in fact, to get there, Savile would have had to almost driven past my parents' house, and they're still there now. But yeah, so there were horror stories from this place. He would obviously get in, sick kids, and he would do whatever he's doing with them. And the nurses would say things like, "Don't say anything, I'll get in trouble," or "There's no way they'll believe you," or "Pretend to be asleep and hopefully he'll go away." Because I guess they felt powerless as well. Obviously, it's not great, but could have clunked him over the head with a kidney dish, could have clunked him over the head with a piss dish, and maybe stuffed some sleeping pills in his mouth and dragged him out the back and give him the taste of his own medicine. Although don't do that. Don't have vigilante justice, I say, because that makes you go crazy as well. But absolute horror stories from there. And then the Great Ormond Street is this very famous sick kids hospital, right? And the logo, I think, was a kid with a tear. That's how sick they were. They all had a single tear on the face. And in one instance, a dying child, a terminally ill child and this was all evidence and everything, touched inappropriately. Again, nothing done about it. But they think he frequented 40 hospitals. Well, no, they know because he was quite public. Frequented 40 hospitals all over the country, and potentially mortuaries as well. So that's where some of the necrophilia stuff comes in. There are people that do say that he would get in there with the dead bodies as well. So he seems to be a generalist. He's certainly he embraces inclusivity in his dirty business. So the young, the old, it wouldn't surprise me if they're animals. Certainly, maybe, possibly dead bodies. And he did stay in the flat with his dead mum for a week after she died, and kept her clothes. I'm sure he put them on as well. What you can do, sue me, Jimmy. There was also a sixth form school where he was allowed to. This was 16 to 18-year-old girls, where he's allowed to park his camper van. I think he helped to build it, and he had keys. And there were on the documentary on Netflix. Actually, you've got these stories of these girls. Now, obviously, women. They would hear the keys jangling down, and they'll think, please don't come in our room, Jimmy. Absolutely insanity. There was also a notorious children's home on Jersey where lots of kids got murdered, I think, there, and there was historic abuse. He visited that multiple times. He was known for pimping out young people to others. Now, this is where we start to get into why was he protected by so many people? If you're procuring young people for other people, who are you procuring them for, right? Probably people with means. Even David Icke was talking about this back in the day. He was saying, he's a procurer of, and these people like Icke, I think some of them like get into some really juicy stuff, and then they go off into interdimensional child molesters, which maybe that's what Savile was. Maybe he was interdimensional. We can't prove it at this point. So it was also, he was an incredibly powerful man. He wasn't just this wacky weirdo. He was an incredibly powerful man, maybe one of the most powerful people in the country. And that, honestly, he was really famous, really rich. And he bragged of his power, and people would call him the Godfather. Some of the thinking is the reason why they didn't report as much as they could. One, a lot of people were told to go away. But two, they had this perception of him as being a really powerful guy. And obviously he has got relationships with the underworld. And I don't know if his brother was still around. Or we need to do a bit of a dive into his brother, I think. But yeah, he come from like a gangster background, or came up within it and then got famous and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of connections. Obviously the police, and he kept those friendships from back in the day when he's partying with them in Manchester. He kept all these friendships of senior police from all over, actually, Leeds, where obviously he lived for a long time, and I think he might have been from there originally. But a weird one is Prince Philip, former husband of the Queen, got him to come into the royal family at one point to give marriage guidance counselling to Prince Charles, now the King, and Princess Diana, she who just had an accident in Paris. Right? But a marriage counsellor, I mean, just that cigar coming through. But apparently Diana did say he was a bit creepy and all that. But yeah, Philip thought it would be good for Charles, and they had a friendship right the way through. I mean, I think we'll talk about some of this in a little bit as well. Yeah, I think maybe I didn't add these in. Let me just grab this picture here for you. Okay, maybe it didn't save, but there are plenty of pictures out there with Prince Charles, and there he is with former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So he had, powerful friends in politics and powerful friends in the royal family, in the police, in healthcare institutions, in probably other areas of government. And again, let's go back to who was he procuring these people for? That needs to be thought of, right? So in total, he was thought to be up to no good, we'll call it, from 1955 to 2009. That's 54 years. That's a 54-year career. All ages, men and women. So again, wasn't specific. A lot of the victims were young women, but it was all ages, men and women. Rumors of necrophilia. And again, during this inquiry, the first formal record in police intelligence was 1964. And this didn't come out until he died in 2012, right? 1964, there was police intelligence suggests he was present at the flat of a known sex offender at the time, right? But it's just kind of an off. Okay, this other guy's here, and then it's just left in a file in, I guess, I think it was London. There was an anonymous letter to New Scotland Yard in 1995 that spoke of his power and influence with royalty and powerful people. So this is someone that maybe was involved in some of this stuff with him, but just decided to write to the police, and that Savile had changed his number after a boy had threatened to blackmail him once. And it was just like giving these specific little things. Nothing was ever done about that letter. In 1963, a man goes into a police station and said that he'd been abused by Jimmy, and police told him to go home. There's another case around about the same time where a man goes into a police station and says, yeah, he attacked my girlfriend, essentially. And again, the police said, what are you doing wasting people's time? They're dangerous allegations. Go away. Johnny Rotten, John Lydon in 1978, possibly banned in part because he brought it up on a radio interview. Oh, we've all heard the rumors about Jimmy, haven't we? This was in the 70s. People came forward in 2003 and 2007. Nothing was done. Part of it was because of the lack of communication between forces. But, it's particularly in those later years, what are we doing here? But he did also have friends, which we'll touch on again in a bit. So he was allegedly friends with a police inspector who would talk down forces when allegations were brought up, or give them soft interviews. If the police were to go and see him, the inspector would ring up the police, listen, he's a friend, go easy. I did have, Mick Starkey is the police inspector. So that's obviously Savile's quite old there, right? So they've been friends a long time, and this guy was the police inspector. So, and he had a breakfast club, right? We'd have police and other councillors and all that around his flat every Friday morning for years. Every Friday morning for years. So you just surrounded himself with these people that could either just get him out of trouble if he needed an emergency call, or that were just in on it with him. I mean, who knows at this point? So he dies, right? 3 weeks after he dies, Newsnight, which is a BBC show, were writing an expose, but it was pulled. They weren't allowed to air it. The Director General of the BBC denied knowing anything about it. There was going to be a tribute Jim will fix it program with Shane Ritchie hosting for Christmas. Did they not want the smoke before that came out? It seems weird. There was a journalist called Liz McKean on Newsnight, and she said there is a powerful group of people at the BBC who believe the story should never have been broken publicly. And I think she means in modern times. I don't know when that interview was given, but at least in the last 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. Nobody has ever been held to account. How many of those have been promoted? How many people end up in? Has anyone gone off to like political positions there, or high ranking civil positions? I don't know. Esther Ranson was a celebrity, and she set up something called Childline. Actually, a friend of mine, the family knew her, and we had a home number, and we'd call her at home and all that, and kind of give her prank calls when we were like 16. But her husband, she set up Childline, which was a line for kids to ring up and say, "Look, my teacher's doing this, or my parents are doing this." It was a good initiative. But her husband was he was an executive in Prime Savile years. It is Dennis something. It forgives me. Google it. Listen, this isn't a fact show. So you're telling me that they didn't know, Esther Ranson and her husband? It was like the 70s and 80s when he was in power. These rumors were rife. Girls would report this stuff to cameramen and to editors, and they would go, "Well, what do you expect us to do about it?" Or they would just say, "Okay," and then not do anything about it anyway. Like we said, we've already got the young girl killing herself. So yeah, what did Ranson and her husband know? Who knows? I'm not saying anything, but it would seem unusual that at least the husband didn't know. I should have had his name. I should have had his name. Should we go? Let's do some live research right now. This is how it happens. This is how facts happen. Desmond Wilcox. Must have known something back then. And so eventually that program did get pulled, but the guy that made that documentary over at ITV actually says it's probably a good job that their documentary came out first, because it was a different story over at Newsnight. It wasn't as impactful. It would have had less victims, but they really did a good job. And it was a real fight to get it on air, a real fight behind the scenes. I guess people were trying to block it, and people didn't want it out and all this kind of stuff, but it had a massive impact. I mean, we know really that the BBC acted poorly all the way through this. Senior management denied it. The current Director General back then said he didn't know, but he probably didn't. I mean, it is historical stuff. You're dealing with this huge organisation, right? But the response was blanket denials, and that was probably the mistake. Like they're doing now with the Hugh Edwards thing, right? It's just, it's a different situation, but there seems to be this slowness to react even after this stuff, which is insane. They just gave blanket denials, and that's that. Well, that's going to come back to bite you. Ended up losing his job, because instead of saying, "Oh shit, really? Let me look into it. Let's see if we can find anything out internally," because you don't know everything about your organization when you're running it, let alone years ago, right? So you can give them the benefit of the doubt about that, but just to say, nah, definitely not here. And so Savile also had this really over the top headstone. I don't know if I can find it here. He wanted all these very specific things, so it was almost like a shrine, right? And it got ordered to be smashed up because these underage boys in my clots. Let me see if I can show this to you guys here in this very unprofessional way. It's his little head either side. Sir Jimmy Savile, Obviously, he was a knight of the realm as well, which we can get into in a bit. But that got sledgehammered to fuck by order of the government because they couldn't have this weird shrine to this guy. Because basically he died and it was all fine, and then it wasn't fine, and then all this come out, which is, again, it's probably suppressed on some level. Certainly dozens and dozens of people within the BBC would have known at different management levels, at least. I mean, like we said, 50 years of it. Come on now. So his honours, he was a very well honoured man. He had an OBE, which is an award of the realm. He had a Knight Bachelor, so he was Sir Jimmy Savile, right? Thatcher had made, that's Margaret Thatcher, had made 4 attempts because they were mates, and he kept getting in her ear. I want to be Sir. I want to be Sir. No, Jimmy, I keep asking, and it's a no from them. And it kept on. Eventually got it. So he's an OBE and a Sir from the knighthood. He had a papal knighthood or papal knighthood from Pope John Paul II, who we know what he was into. And I mean, look, all of them maybe in a gold hat on a gold chair. We got your own little laws and own little weird city. Hallelujah. He was also an honorary fellow of the College of Radiologists. I'll find your cancer. By cancer, I mean boy. Or young girl, I should say. He had the Cross of Merit. The Cross of Merit Order Pro Merito Melitensi. And sorry about my Harry Potter speak, my parcel tongue. So we'll try again. The Cross of Merit Order Pro Merito Melitensi. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta. He had an honorary Green Beret. And I will try and find this because he had a Green Beret on with the picture I had of Charles as well. But the picture must have saved to some weird format. Yeah, I can find it here. This is a very weird way for me to show you pictures, guys. It feels more homely, right? There's Jimmy with his Green Beret and Prince, now King Charles. So we had a Royal Marines Green Beret, an honorary doctorate of law from Leeds, another honorary doctorate from, double doctor, from the University of Bedfordshire. And he was a freeman of the borough of Scarborough. I assume that means he had the keys to the city or something. I'm a free man. Very odd. Very odd indeed. So, for me, as a child, I didn't know. And I guess everyone thought he was wacky. And he would make these inferences to liking young girls. He'd often admit stuff on camera like, oh, I'm evil, I am. Oh, I'm very dark. And people would be like, okay, you're such a character, Jimmy. But I mean, that one. I imagine being a 6th form girl and you're going to sleep and you hear the keys jangle and it's dark and you hear a little creep, a little squeak of a door. And you see this one orange ember that illuminates this pointed nose and wacky hair, round rimmed glasses, and the little ember from the cigar reflects off those glasses and you smell it. And he's between your legs and he's going, oh, I'm here to check. I'm here to check for crumpets. Because that's what it would have been like. Horrifying, but you can't help but go, how the fuck were people giving him the keys 24 hours a day to go into girls' schools, hospitals, children's hospitals, for years and years and years and years. And, you know, there was no internet back then, but a lot of people probably wouldn't know he was doing that. It was just that, he's built this hospital, he helps out, I'm a porter. But you get these vulnerable people, even in Broadmoor, right? These vulnerable positions and just in pretty much in the open. And like you said, all the staff at Stoke Mandeville knew he was doing it. So I'm sure all the staff at every hospital knew he was doing it, but they were told to shut the fuck up. You know, how many doctors got fired or moved aside when they were complaining? I mean, we've got to look at Vincent Savile a little bit. Was he still around? Because I think in one instance, a girl said it was him and his brother as well. And I think he did have 2 brothers, so I don't want to say something that's not true like that. But was there still this underworld connection? Did people get a beat down every now and then? If they started a bit of this, did people get disappeared by Vincent? I honestly don't know about anything about that. I don't know when his brothers died. I don't know what he was into, whether he went to prison. That would be an interesting one for us to talk about and go through. But yeah, there he is with his police inspector friend, Mick Starkey. Very, very strange. I think that's it. I mean, there we go. I don't know. There's a nice little half an hour with you guys, isn't it? I think there's a lot more. And I just laugh because of one, that's what I do, but also the absolute weirdness of that hanging around schools and no one doing anything about it. I mean, the royal family alone, just getting in Buckingham Palace, right? You've got the Royal Protection Squads. Now, I've since seen a lot of interviews with some of these police that guard the palace, and they have said over the years, people like Jimmy, they were just given a free pass. No, you don't ask questions, you let them in. And that came from the family, because the family could lean on the police, right, and say, listen, let them in. And it also happened with Ghislaine Maxwell visiting Prince Andrew as well. Just don't ask questions. He's got a friend coming, shut up. And then from now on, they just get let in. Andrew also had a lot of young girls coming in and out of there as well. And again, the police were told to shut the fuck up. And this one cop said one time they held her at the police lodge and called through, and they're like, we can't let you in because we can't get an answer. And she called him on his mobile, and he found out and rang the police. And they went batshit at the police. That Andrew went batshit at the cops and called them, fat pricks and all this. Let her through. So you get. I'm sure it's a little bit different now. It must be after this. But if the royal family say no, we let them in. Did they do the background checks? I mean, it's not just the Royal Protection Squad. MI5, the security service, have a duty of care, I guess, to the royal family. And there were rumors they were following around Princess Diana in the UK and MI6 abroad and all that sort of stuff. But MI5 would have had the desire, I feel, to look into the background of people that were regularly visiting the royals. I'm sure they would, even if the police didn't. The Royal Protection Police didn't. So they would have known about this behaviour in these reports, but it's still, whether the family knew or whether, listen, we can go into the deep, dark worlds of like procurement and all that. Was anyone procured for any member of that family? There's often rumours about that kind of stuff, and certainly senior members of government at the time. But it's definitely an odd one. But it's just a fascinating. I'm fascinated by it now. Because when it come out, obviously we were joking about it, and the band Cunt and the Gang had a great song called "Sexy Kids." Very much mocking Jimmy Savile, but it's done in such a rough way. Yeah. So I don't know. You in the UK? Do you know about it? Obviously, what do you know? Do you know anything else? Obviously, there's a lot of other stuff. But let us know in the comments what your knowledge is of Savile. Did you know him? Did you go to any of his nightclubs? Did you? Do you know? Are you his brother? Are you alive? Are you out there, Jimmy? Jimmy's mum. But what happened in his upbringing? There's rumours that he had a bad accident and he couldn't sleep or blink for 6 months. I don't know. He bumped his head. Was this down to a head bump? Was this down to mummy drinking gin and dropping baby Jimmy on the floor? Baby James! Just having a clunker. And that one clunker just makes your child to be one of the most notorious, prolific, naughty men. We'll call him naughty men in history. Because I think they found 450 complainants or something like that, 215 crimes. But that's what you catch and that's what you know, right? If you know about 450, how many people just died and never told anyone? How many people just forgot? How many people didn't want to come forward? Is it 500? Is it 600? Is it 1,000? I think Harold Shipman killed a few hundred people, right? We need to go into Shipman one day. Yeah, and I'm interested to how long these ties went on with his brother and whether or not there was any intimidation from that side of the family into potential victims or even the police or, the blackmail stuff. And I think, a lot of stuff we'll never know, but it is very interesting. I never knew, because I knew he's from Leeds, or he lived in Leeds and died in Leeds and all that. I never knew that he had the history here in Manchester. Like, had the flat in Salford and the nightclub in town. So I'm going to go and look at some of these venues just to look at it and go, really? That's where he started? If anyone has any pictures of those clubs, like the 3 coins or whatnot from that side, let me know in the comments as well. It's very very odd, but also disgusting. And there he is with our Prime Minister, best of friends. So thank you very much, guys. And if you haven't, please give us a subscribe. It would be very nice. I'll do all kinds of weird topical stuff, but I'm going to call this topical because I'm thinking about it. So I can go back to the dinosaurs if I want. Pig. I just asked you to subscribe and then called you a pig, but relax about it. And again, the podcast version of this is the numbered episodes, and yeah, I normally have guests on for those, and we'll as ever, I'll say they're coming and then they're not for a while. But yeah, that'll do. Go and have a little bop. Go out clubbing tonight if you want. Listen to that DJ, and just remember, who have you got to thank? You got to thank Jimmy, Sir Jimmy Savile. Thank you very much. See you later. Subscribe. Have a nice Sunday.